Welcome. This is Mason One-on-One with Mason Votes. We're sitting down today with Colonel Chris Perkins, Republican congressional candidate for Virginia's 11th Congressional District. Colonel Perkins, thank you for being here.
Shane, I appreciate being here.
So let's start off. I'm sure you've been asked this question many a times. Why are you running for Congress?
Never asked that.
And what do you feel is missing in Washington that's compelled you to run?
You know, Shane, that is the most often asked question, and it is also the one that as a candidate I have to tell you that it is probably the most complicated, and it changes. I'm one of those guys who just felt that enough was enough. I felt that change comes from within more than from without, and that if I really wanted to make a difference, that I needed to be one of those guys in Congress that I am so unhappy with. And so my mother is very upset. She says,
"Why would you go from a profession that has 92% public approval to one that has less than 9?" I said, "Mom, you can't put your head in the sand and hope these folks go away. You got to do it."
Mm. And you talk about the approval rating of Congress, obviously, and a lot of that's due to the fact that the institution's just not working. There's not a lot of bipartisanship going on right now. So if you were elected, how would you work in a bipartisan way?
Well, you have to, and
I've told folks in the past that I have role models that have shown me how to do it. I was fortunate enough, Shane, to have 4 tours in the military up on Capitol Hill. And I got to see it done right, and I got to see it done wrong. I had one of those tours was the opportunity to be a congressional fellow for Senator Jim Jeffords, who said, "You can compromise on the issues. You just can't compromise on your values and your principles," he says. You know, go to Ronald Reagan as the guy who said 80% solutions, not bad. Tom Davis, who's a local congressman here in Fairfax, in the 11th District, is another guy who said, you know, you come to the table, meet people halfway and say, yeah, let's work this out bipartisan. There's an old adage, it was actually Tip O'Neill, the guy who said that all politics are local. His chief of staff was also the guy who coined the phrase third rail of politics. He was referring at the time to entitlements reform. But what the media did not pick up on or did not put out there was that he continued that conversation to say that if both sides grasp that third rail together, no one gets hurt.
So I'm a big believer that we can make this happen. You just have to have the will to do so. You can never put party ahead of the people you represent.
Mm. And you talk about Tip O'Neill talking about the third rail of politics and entitlements, and one of the issues that you've talked about on your website is cutting spending. And you say you want to eliminate waste. You specifically state that you want to get rid of duplicative programs. So which programs would you work to get rid of that you do see as redundant, and is military spending on like obsolete technology, is that something that you're willing to go after as well?
Well, backing into that, I would say yes, absolutely. But let me preface my answer to just a real fast breakdown. Next year, the first 6 cents on the dollar that the federal government spends will be interest on the debt. $248 billion will be going to the credit card company, if you will. 27 cents on the dollar is going towards national security, Defense Department, CIA, or intelligence communities, and so forth. That's 27%. 19% of the federal budget will go towards all non-security spending, your departments of commerce and so forth. And 48%, Shane, will be spent on entitlements. It's the elephant in the room. So,
all of these areas, there is room for improvement, efficiencies, if you will. In the Defense Department, for instance, your intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which is a huge, especially as a Green Beret, that was what we did. We've got just too many organizations all doing their own thing. The efficiencies by merging some of those programs would be huge. Transportation, there's a case where you have 5 different agencies worrying about ground transportation policy. There's 100 programs, and they're all disconnected. Food safety. Everybody says, well, the Food and Drug Administration can handle that. There's 16 other agencies that are working food safety at the time. Education. 10 different federal agencies, 42 programs on how to train our teachers. These are the areas that I'm talking about. So those are the efficiencies. But in terms of we've got to get on a path to fiscal solvency. Right now we have $16 trillion worth of debt. We have over $1 trillion annually going towards the deficit. We're spending more than $1 trillion more than we have. You have to go after that elephant in the room, that
48 cents on the dollar that is going towards entitlement spending.
Going back to the issue of education, you say again on your website that you want to introduce the market principles of choice and competition to education. What do you mean by that?
Well, what's happened over time is
as the federal government got more involved in education and worked with the unions and so forth, we've turned it into a monopoly. And if you understand what a monopoly is designed on purpose to give the least product for the most cost. And that's what's happened. If right now, I think we are spending approximately $14,000 every year for one student. This is at K through 12. It's been estimated that if we introduce choice and competition to this equation, that we can cut that in half. And right now, for instance, Fairfax counties, where I happen to be running, their budget, 56% goes towards education. Imagine if you could cut your costs in half through choice and competition, what you could do with those additional
tax revenues.
And a lot of people would say that, cutting education is obviously something that Republicans are always for. And so what is it that you can do message-wise that says, we're not just cutting education to just get rid of the dollars because it's too much spending,
Sure.
but it's going to make the system more efficient for the students and also for the teachers?
Well, Shane, first of all, I think it comes back to the
role of government. And I see government as being three equal pillars, not a hierarchy as my opponent seems to feel, but three separate pillars: local, state, and federal level. And so each has their roles and missions, and I think that in the case of education, there's a very small role at the federal level, and that this should be better handled by the state. And if the state's doing their job right, Shane, they're passing that down to the community.
Going back to another, you talked about your military background. What is it with your military background? What do you see as the biggest challenge facing America's military, but foreign policy challenge coming up in the next 4 years?
Well, foreign policy, I think, and it's how I was raised in the military,
should be founded on an equation that a threat equals capability plus intent. There's countries out there, for instance, that have the capability to hurt America, but zero intent. They're not a threat, and it should be our foreign policy to keep it that way. There are countries out there who have, such as Iran, let's use them as an example, who have a stated intent to destroy America, but don't have the capability. Once again, to keep them from becoming a real threat to America, we have to preclude their ability to gain that capability. So that's where I start with. The next thing I usually talk about on foreign policy is that it should every discussion should start with a question: what's in it for us? With a dot after the U and a dot after the S. What's in it for America? What's in it for us? We can't afford, either through blood or treasure, to be everything for everybody. Now, it breaks my heart sometimes, and as a Green Beret who spent most of my adult life in countries that could really use our help, we can't be everything for everybody. Now, we have a big issue facing America right now, and it's facing Fairfax, and it's facing Prince William County as well, this area, the 11th District. And that is, it's got a big $10 word: sequestration. What this really means is it's a $500 billion worth of defense cuts that are coming down our way. These defense cuts not only diminish our military readiness posture, our intelligence communities, our border securities, but it hits our local economy harder than any other of the 435 districts in America.
No excuse to be in favor of this.
And another national security issue that's gotten a lot of talk over the years is immigration and how we have to protect our border with Mexico. So on your website, you talk about a statute of repose idea in regards to immigration. Is this a pathway to citizenship or amnesty? And if it is, or even if it isn't, do you support the DREAM Act in some way as it is now, or would you like to see it reformed and then brought up for a vote in Congress?
Well, my problem with the DREAM Act
It is rewarding illegal status, and that's, I just can't about it. I think America, we are a nation of law, if you will. Now, what you're referring to is something that I think Newt Gingrich sort of alluded to early on in his campaign, was that what are you going to do with the 11 million plus illegal immigrants in America? You cannot just stick your head in the sand and pretend it's going to go away. I do believe, and I'm glad the way you asked your question was, is immigration related to national security, not just our economy, if you will. I am more concerned about the bad guy coming across the border than I am about someone who's just looking to do his family better, looking for work here. But I do believe we can secure our borders. It's not bricks and mortar necessarily, though in some cases that might be the case. It's technology, and we have it. We just got to have the will, and we've got to have the resources to put towards that. So I believe that we can stop the flow, but in that same time, we've got to deal with these 11 million, and so therefore I've put forth a statute of repose. Now, for your viewers,
and again, I want to, Shane, I'm not a lawyer. It's important that you understand that. But as I understand it, a statute of repose, it's very similar to a statute of limitations, which is a period of time that starts upon the discovery of a crime. Statute of repose is a period of time that starts not upon the discovery of the crime, but the commission of the crime, when it happened.
So in the case of immigration, if you cross the border illegally, the clock starts. And therefore, if you've been here a certain period of time, and it shouldn't be such a small period of time that they could hide out in a basement, but it shouldn't be so long that they live their lives in fear here in America. We can have that discussion. We can come up with what is that appropriate time. But when that appropriate time is up, these folks should be allowed to apply for legal status, start paying taxes,
and get in line for citizenship.
I guess kind of the final question, it's going back to your military experience, but has to do with the domestic kind of policy issue. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Did you see that as a step forward for the United States military? I know we have a lot of veterans here on campus, and some of them may be gay or lesbian. So did you see Don't Ask, Don't Tell as a step forward? And you also talk about that on the issue of gay rights, you say all Americans, regardless of their color, religion, or sexual orientation, should be entitled to exactly the same rights under the Constitution. Is that supporting gay marriage?
Whoa, a whole different bunch in there. But on
the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, let me first say that I had someone say, "Oh, we're doomed." Absolutely not. This will have zero effect on our ability to prosecute our nation's wars. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a policy that worked, but it wasn't fair. Now it's fair. I have no problem with it whatsoever. None. I mean, there will be some mechanics that'll have to get worked out, but I think that was just fine. I do believe that as a Republican, I do believe in individual rights, and I don't believe in assigning who gets these rights and who does not, which individuals do. I was telling a reporter recently on the marriage issue that I'm a traditionalist. I was married in church. I see marriage, that term marriage, as a pact that my wife and I made before God. But I am a big believer in civil unions because 1,137 legal provisions change upon marriage. And why should we be deciding that some should not? This goes there's some of the minor, but it's who can visit at the hospital, who can pull the switch, who can do this, who can do that.
Well, thank you for being here today.
No, I'm grateful. I really am.
We really do appreciate it. So how do you feel about your chances here in Virginia?
Oh, I think they're very high.
We're a lot of buzz out there. Mr. Conley has taken an interesting tack recently about challenging my credentials as a career military officer for federal office, suggesting that I've had no sweat equity, is how he called it, in the district, and I suggested that perhaps I have blood equity in America instead, but I think the voters understand that I can bring some proven leadership here, and we're seeing that at the doors. A lot of young people out there banging the doors for us, getting the word out. This would be just a matter of, can we touch enough people?
How do you feel about Mitt Romney's chances?
I think they're good. I think it's a really interesting race. I do. I mean, he's got recently a major surge in the polls here in Virginia as well. He's done well in the debates. I think people are tired of the numbers. If you take away, there's political science and then there's the art that you add to it. On the political science side, the numbers being what they are, 16 trillion of debt, no real plan to get us out of it. We need change, and people realize that. And it's not so much change in America, but change in Washington that I think they're looking for. So I think Mitt's got a pretty good chance. I don't have a crystal ball any more than you do. It's close, but we'll see.
Awesome. Well, once again, this is One-on-One with Mason Votes. Colonel Chris Perkins joined us. Thank you once again. We really
Shane,
appreciate
it was a pleasure. It really
No
was.
problem.
I'd like to
Thank
come
you very
back
much.
someday.
Yeah, please do.